terms of the firewall construction of the unit. So it's not, it's great in some cases, but you can't necessarily put, you know, if you get that close, you can't necessarily put a window in that wall. So let's see, ADUs can't be limited in height to less than 16 feet, and then 22 feet max. That had to do with the 2-story, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and this was a recent change too, that they were realizing, oh, if you're gonna have 2 stories, you can't keep it at 16 feet. So they made some adjustments to that. And then this is about parking. We have a whole parking slide. All right, so here's the parking. So with conversion ADUs or junior ADUs, there's no parking requirement except in certain coastal areas. And the coastal area thing is, it's a little bit specific. So if anybody here is in the coastal area, that's something we should talk about maybe on the side, just because it gets pretty specific. So for new construction ADUs, there's in the city of Santa Cruz, there's no parking requirement except in those certain coastal areas. But in the county, there is one parking space that is required for the ADU, except in the following locations when outside of their certain coastal areas. So the exceptions to this are historic districts. If you're within a block of a designated car share parking area, if you're within a half-mile walking distance of any transit stop. And so, so these in coastal parking regulation inside certain coastal areas. Okay, so yes, inside coastal areas, one parking space is required for new construction ADUs. There are exceptions, or sorry, there are no exceptions, and the replacement parking is required if there's an existing structure that's demolished or converted to create that unit. So that's another thing I should point out. In these instances within conversion ADUs, a lot of times what's happening is people are converting their garages, and so they're taking the parking out of their garage and putting it somewhere else, right, and putting in the unit. What the law says is that you can't require, when we're doing conversion ADUs, you can't require, there's no requirement for parking for the actual unit that's being constructed in the garage. And then also there's no requirement to replace the parking that is getting moved out of that. So it kind of frees up this ability to actually put these units in where in the past, a lot of these things, they would be held up because of the parking requirements. And really for the most part, it's opened up quite a bit, and it's just in very specific coastal areas where it's
coastal area.
Coastal area is like, if you go to the map for the jurisdiction, there's a line that indicates the coastal area, and there's a certain distance from the coast.
We can help you get there. That's not a link that I have on there.
About 6 blocks.
Yeah. I don't know what the exact number is.
There's a line. We're way more than 6 blocks, and like 24 square feet of a corner of our property is. Well,
that's a little bit different. There's like the coastal area, and then there's the coastal appeal zone. So that's a little bit different.
Don't have issues though that need to be considered, right?
No, just the coastal area. They restricted. I mean, they pulled it back quite a bit. Okay, so that's parking. Okay, so the great thing about ADUs is that it's ministerial permit process, which means you don't have to. It's like straight to building permit. So you don't have to go through the planning department to get these approved. So you just go, you submit for the building permit, and you have to go through that process. I mean, you still have to go through the building permit process stuff, which can be its own challenges. let's see. So
We covered all of it.
did we?
Well, in previous.
Yeah, this is just,
Yeah.
this is just, these are all the kind of the requirements of how they need to approve it if it meets this criteria, which we did cover that. So, all right. So,
We want to make time for questions.
yeah. So fees, there have been reductions in fees, because that was also an impediment to people building ADUs. So new construction attached ADUs are now eligible for the same exclusion from the utility connection fees that were previously available to conversion ADUs. So you can see
If
that
anybody's come across that, that's kind of a big one because people were required to put in really expensive additional infrastructure that made it cost prohibitive really for a lot of people. So.
So then we have just kind of a quick snippet on permit fees. These are just from the city. Is this city?
Okay, so these are city permit fees. You know, they have it listed there, just estimates of 400 square feet or 800 square feet for new construction, roughly between 6,000 and 11,000, 6,000.
I'm sorry, but we really can't hear you.
These permit fees here are for the city specifically. The county has a worksheet that you can go to, an Excel spreadsheet. It's just they don't kind of tie it up in a bow the way the city did. So the city says new construction between 400 and 800 square feet is going to be roughly between $6,000 and $12,000, and a conversion ADU is going to be roughly $5,000. Those are like the related fees associated to that. Permit fees for the county, again, is kind of more case by case. And so they have a Excel spreadsheet you can download, and those links are on the website and in that document.
Okay, and then there's also there's potential for grant funding, which would cover the costs for the pre-development costs for the ADU, and it up to $40,000. So this is just another way that.
And the link is also on the website.
The link is on the website. Okay. Actually, let me we should back up one. Well, we don't have to back up in the slide necessarily, but this is my thought process. We didn't talk about septic. So since septic was a conversation last week here, septic. So
is anybody here on septic? Let's just start there. Okay.
Yeah. So septic is a bit of a challenge for ADUs because the state is requiring the ADUs are considered a separate unit, so therefore it needs its own septic. Mm-hmm. So it does require. Basically, what that means is that you need to be able to build a separate septic system for that unit. And for a lot of properties in this county, that building new septic systems may require an enhanced treatment system, which is just expensive. It's expensive, yeah. So that is something to keep in mind. So that could certainly be an impediment to being able to build an ADU. But I believe the junior ADU is still an option because that can tie into the main house through the septic that way. Okay, so these are so AB is assembly bill. These are a couple of assembly bills that have passed recently, and so we just want, and they're related to ADUs. And so I'm gonna.
Very few of you probably are related to this and all because they're so specific. So we're just put them both on one slide. I just felt like we needed to at least tell you that they exist. So, but we need to, yeah.
Okay. I mean, just high level, this is about being able to sell your ADUs separately, but that's very specific in terms of who can do that. And then this is about streamlining the process even more than what I said earlier, but this is about streamlining the permitting process. And also it gets into talking about being able to rent ADUs when you're within an HOA, because HOAs, when this first came out, HOAs were restricting who could actually rent the ADU separately. And so this kind of addresses that a little bit. Okay, so that was ADUs. And one thing I meant to say at the beginning is that we are covering a few topics. So we're covering it because this is all about kind of basically adding units onto your property in different ways. ADU is one way to do that. SB 9, which is Senate Bill 9, in this passed last year, the beginning of last year, is another option. And then also tiny homes are another option for ways that we can get, you have the ability to add more units.
Tom was suggesting that maybe we pause for a second before we move on to SB 9 to either gather questions on the board, or if there's general ADU questions that you think might pertain to the whole group that we maybe skimmed or missed. And then we'll have more questions and answers at the end about it. Go ahead.
Clarification on something that you said, that 4-foot setback or 5 foot or 3 foot or whatever. Is that from the property line on each side?
Yeah.
Side property line, back property line?
Yeah. So the question is the setback, either the 4-foot setback or the 3-foot setback, is that from the property line? And the answer is yes. It's from the side property line and also the rear property line, not the front property line. You can't be that close to the front, but you could be that close to the side, and you can be that close to the rear.
What was the $40,000 figure you threw out there a little while back? $40,000 what?
I think that was for the grant funding. So the question was, what was the $40,000 figure? That was the
pre-construction.
Yeah, pre-development costs for there's potential for grants to pay for pre-development costs up to $40,000.
You're looking at one right there.
Yeah, so that would be the pre-development is basically all the costs up to the point of when you basically start construction.
Are those grants relative to income, or are they?
I don't have enough information specifically about the grants, but that is information we have on the website, and that could be dug into.
In terms of the setbacks, with an existing building that's already on the property line, that does not pertain to that.
Right.
So one of the things about the setback question that you had that I don't think we mentioned in here is that if you have a property that has an outbuilding, let's just call it that, that's on the property line already, then you can convert that and may not have any, it may be right on the property line. So I don't think that we mentioned that.
Right.
Timerie, would you say that again? If you're right on the property line, what?
So if you have an existing structure that is on the property line or very close to it, you could still do a conversion ADU within that structure. And you can also add up to 150 square feet to that footprint that you already have. Even though that slide said that there's a 3 to 4 foot setback, if you're less than that and it exists, that's okay. You can leave it where it is. Right.
So last time I knew, I was on the Santa Cruz website, and I thought I saw some pre-approved like ADUs, like three different sets, and so that's like supposed to streamline the whole process for you. You guys know much more about that at all?
Was that on the county or city website?
I think I'm not sure which site that was on.
So the city did have a plan. Okay, sorry. So the question was, does the city or county have pre-approved plans? Is that Is that a fair way to state your question?
Yeah, but I just wanted to know if you knew more about it, like,
So, so that they're not necessarily pre-approved, the plans. The county does have, some plans through, some other,
Prefabricated, prefab, some prefab, I mean, we could talk about this forever, but there's prefab, there's modular, and then there's offsite construction. Those are like three ways to get something there. On the county, they have a design booklet that really gives you plans, actual plans for them, but they're not like, hey, if you pick this, you don't have to do X, Y, Z. They tried to do that in the city like a decade ago, and it didn't really work very well. And so they're trying to do it again. I've heard in other cities, I think Capitola is trying to do it. So it's kind of jurisdiction based, I believe, but right now the city and the county don't have that, but there are a lot of resources that help you get there more quickly. And, we can talk more about specifically the benefits of doing some of those. It's just that, our properties here are so specific that they were finding that those cookie cutter plans don't really work. Everybody had to sort of modify them in some way.
So what does the city require? You require a bathroom with a shower or something like that. They require a stove, a sink, a certain amount of preparation space, and then a certain size refrigerator. Is that all posted somewhere on the city website? Because we went in there one day and the woman said, well, I can't really tell you what to do. Bring your plans in and then we'll evaluate them. I go like, well, I don't even know what you want.
Right.
So what do they want?
Where did we get it?
I mean, how much space for a sink? How much space for a drain board? How much cupboard space they need? What size refrigerator, right?
So I think there are a lot of resources in there, but I mean, I think the quick answer is that they, for a junior ADU, there isn't like the kitchen needs to be this size. There's like an efficiency kitchen. If you go to the county, they answer the question, what is efficiency kitchen? I mean,
well, this would be detached.
Yeah. So there is no, like, a kitchen needs to be this size.
Really?
Not
In the
really.
city?
I mean, there's the bedrooms, well, I'm gonna let you talk to this because he's giving me a look. Hold on.
no. But, I mean, there are certain minimums for rooms. And this goes back to the building code. So, so in terms of answering that question, there's a minimum, like you do need to have, for the kitchen, you're going to need the sink, you're going to need the cooktop and the oven, maybe not the oven, but the refrigerator.
I think you need an oven. I think you do need an oven.
I think you may be able to do it through, there may be some other ways to handle that, but then you have, yes, you do need a bathroom, and then depending on if it's a studio or if it's a one bedroom, there are certain rooms, like there are sizes to the rooms, and there's certain minimum
So where do we
sizes.
get that
Where do we find
information?
them?
So that's something we can help you with.
But
Oh.
there is a lot of resources on there that you
On
can
there?
find if you go to our website or that will take you to the county and the city. So we kind of tried to incorporate as much, and what isn't on there, if it's looking like, you can call us, and the clock does not, we don't start charging people for those kinds of calls.
And just, I'll just say that we did put cards on the table over there. So when you do leave, if you want to grab a card, you can reach out, call, email, whatever, and we can help get you in the right answer.
You
Yes.
said something about
Go ahead.
that the ADU, a regular ADU, has to be 50% of the size of the original house or less, not more than 50%.
Not more than, yeah, if it's
It can
a,
be less than 50%.
yes, if it's attached.
What if there's already two existing one-bedroom houses on the property that are already grandfathered in because from the old days, that they're each 800 square feet? Would they count two of them together as 1,600 square feet and then allow for a 500 square foot ADU that's a conversion?
Well, in that particular case, it sounds like we're talking about multifamily. If there was if
No,
it's
they-
legal.
It is legal because it was before the fifties, so they grandfathered the two houses in. So it's, we have a terminology they use there.
Right. I think that's something that we'd have to dig into with you. Yeah, that's getting a little bit more specific.
That requires you picking up a business. card.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, in the back.
Yeah, I'm wondering about this delay of building code enforcement. What does that mean? Is it
That was-
an existing de facto ADU that hasn't been permitted, but it's used as an ADU or?
Right, and they were, so the idea there was if they're in existence, bringing them up to code or into the fold, they were putting some sort of time frame that it wouldn't, not everybody would have to update it right away. It was kind of a grandfathering in, but ultimately there would be, some process to get them up to code.
There is a process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over how long?
I have to, that one, I'm not sure on exactly what the timing is on it.
It
So
was
we'd have to-
until 2025, but it's probably getting extended because of COVID and because they had to put timelines on lots of these things, but there's not really probably much.
When it first came out, it was 2025.
Sorry.
I wish I could have heard that.
It currently is supposed to expire in 2025, but we would need to check to see if they've officially extended that.
Okay.
So,
Is that the city?
I think that's state. That's a state, that was a state handed down thing in 2020.
Yes.
You build an ADU and rent it out, does that put you into the rental inspection program in Santa Cruz?
Yes. Yes, it does. So, if you're renting anything out, you're in the rental inspection program in Santa Cruz. You got some questions on the board?
You can go with them first.
Okay.
I didn't understand whether you said you can or cannot combine.
You can,
Can.
yes. That's allowed.
What's the question?
So you can have both a junior ADU and an ADU on the same parcel, yes.
Yeah, for clarification, under permitting amendments, you're right, ministerial permits must be approved for new construction detached of up to 800 square feet. How does that square with them not being able to limit to 800 square feet? Like under the county, you said it could be 1250. So how do the two relate?
I'm not sure I
The
understand.
State handed down that it cannot be less than 800 square feet, but the city went beyond that and said it actually can be 12.
Right, but then you're saying they must be approved for a detached ADU of up to 800. What about above 800?
Well,
Yeah, that's language directly from the bill. So in the case of the city and the county, it's still a ministerial process. So it still is this, technically more of a streamlined process because it's straight to building permit.
Only if it's up to 800 square feet.
No, it's still for just as an ADU.
Couple more and then we'll move to the next segment.
Yes, over here.
Garage conversion in city limits. How much can that be expanded?
It's with a conversion, you can add 150 square feet onto that. I'm trying to think of if that's considered considered conversion, or if it's considered new. Because if you're maintaining the garage and building on top of it, it's not really converting that space. But you still have, the 150 square feet was just a way for somebody to convert an existing structure and convert that into a unit, but be able to expand it in some way and they may not be able to get up to, 800 square feet with that. But when you build on top and you're building, somewhat of a new on, maybe, new on top, you can go higher in your square footage. 800 square feet is just that's the state limit. The state would say the jurisdictions can't limit the ADUs to be less than 800 square feet. But sorry, can't the maximum size. They need to allow up to at least 800 square feet on the ADUs. But in terms of the conversion, it's a little bit different because you're taking an existing structure and then adding 150 square feet onto it. Yes.
My question is that the city of Santa Cruz requires fire service. So, in example, our house, we have electric water, we have fire service water. Would any ADU added in the property where another
So
pass on to the
So the question here is about sprinklers. So our well, we'll start with our sprinklers required. Sprinklers are required if the existing house has sprinklers. So if the house doesn't have sprinklers, then the ADU is not required to have sprinklers. If the existing house does have sprinklers, then the ADU will have to have sprinklers.
But it doesn't.
I believe you could just use. I think you can go use that same system. Yeah. Yes.
Lamar?
Yep.
What you said with junior ADUs, it has to be owner occupied. Is there like a time limit on that? Can you build it and then move out after a year? Or when you sell it, does the new owner have to occupy it?
It's in perpetuity. So junior ADUs are owner occupied only. One thing I should bring up about the owner occupancy requirement with regular ADUs, which would be the conversion or detached or attached potentially, is that there is no owner occupancy requirement as of right now. The state said between the years of 2020 and 2025, there will be no requirement for owner occupancy for ADUs that are constructed in that time frame. We don't know yet. We're we're a little more than halfway through that time frame now. We don't know if that's going to be extended or if they're gonna hold to that. It's we're just not sure. But for the junior ADUs, it is required for owner occupancy. In terms of where the owner can live, the owner can live in either the main house or the junior ADU.
Do they have to live there year round? Or do they live there 6 months out of the year? Or?
I don't know exactly to the detail. That's a great question because this is what we like to dig into when we're talking about laws and codes, like how do we maximize this? I would guess my guess is it's probably 6 months and a day. It's probably it's probably
Like a tax,
similar to
yeah.
taxes. Yeah.
And we won't get into the empty home tax.
Yeah.
So we have two more topics to talk about. We've got SB 9, which I think is really interesting, and we have tiny homes. And so we need to move really quickly. And so I just want to say, because I don't think it's late. And so, SB 9 is something that's really interesting. I think that people don't really understand. It's not going to really apply to everybody, but it could apply to some of you. And it's a really interesting opportunity that the state has handed down. And it allows homeowners to basically subdivide their property and sell one half off. But the rule is that you have to stay living on the property for 3 years. So as an example, if you live in a house that has a huge backyard and you can draw a line that doesn't require you to tear that down, and that additional lot is 40% at least, then you can subdivide that lot and sell it off and stay in your house and take that cash and do what you will. So that's a really exciting opportunity for people that are trying to find a way to live here. It's also an exciting opportunity if you have somebody in your family that wants to get into home ownership and you're trying to, you know, bring down your overhead or whatever. So,
You have to build a house first before you sell it, or can you just?
you don't have to build the house.
You can split the lot?
Yeah, you can split the lot and somebody else can build the house. You could split the lot, build the house, rent it, and then sell it down the road. You can actually put 4 units. It's not just 1 and 1. You could do 4 units. It could be 2 duplexes. If you had a vacant lot, that's a unicorn here, I know, but like if you had a vacant lot, you could put 2 houses on each, and you can actually map those and you could sell all 4 of them off individually eventually. So it's a complex situation. We wanted to tell you about it because it really opens up a lot of opportunity for some people, but it's complex, and so it's going to require probably individual conversations with each of you.
Minimum lot size, I'm thinking about the little tiny ones in Seabright.
Right.
There is.
Yeah, what is it for?
Let's
It's
go to
small.
the next slide. Okay. So what Timerie was saying is that you can divide it, and it does require a minimum of a 60-40 split. So it needs to kind of fall within that range. But there is a minimum lot size of 1,200 square feet. This is state.
This is a state handed
This is state.
down. So,
In the county, that would.
Yeah.
So, you had 2 existing houses on 1 tax parcel. You could split and make a new separate.
as
tax
long as
parcel.
it fit into the 60-40 split, yeah.
Yeah.
How big it is.
1,200 square foot is the
for the
minimum
lot.
lot size. Yeah.
Yes, that's the minimum lot size. Yes.
The
Yes.
purpose of all of these is housing density,
Yeah.
as we're seeing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, single family zoning.
we're working on that. I can talk to you about that after.
Okay. So, so in terms of, anyway, I think Timerie already kind of hit these pieces already in the last. So in terms of, so for SB9, this is also for the splitting the lot and adding more units to it. There's certain parking things related to that, which basically says parking, 1 off-street parking space per unit is required unless the project site is located within a half-mile walking distance to quality transit corridor or a major transit stop, or a car share vehicle is located within 1 block of the parcel. So a lot of the city of Santa Cruz, that covers a lot of the city. The county is different, but almost it's almost like if you're in the city, you could do this, and there's no parking requirement for those units for the most part. ADUs are allowed to be built in as well. So as in Timerie's example, she was saying you could build up to 4 units on the 2 parcels. So the scenario where an ADU, you could do a single family with an ADU on 1 parcel, and then on the other parcel you could do a duplex, or you could do a single family with an ADU and a single family with an ADU. Or you could do a duplex with the ADU and a single family, but you just can't get more than 4 units, the 4 units max for that total development. And also short-term rentals are not allowed. So you can't rent it for a term less than 30 days. Yes. Yes.
Are there any things for whoever are financing, any lending institutions finance these things?
You want to take that? Can you repeat the question?
The question is there financing for projects like this? This is not I mean, it seems totally crazy that this is even a thing, but it's not, it's normal construction lending. So our local lender that we send a lot of people to is Santa Cruz County Bank. They're one of the most active construction lending companies here, but any bank that does construction lending can help finance any project that we're talking about, well, except for maybe tiny homes.
Okay, let's go to the,
Okay, and speaking of tiny homes, okay, so tiny home is basically a house on a trailer that can be towed on public roads with a special permit from the DMV. And it cannot be any larger than 400 square feet, no taller than 14 feet. And they have to be constructed in strict compliance with certain standards. They can be purchased from a certified manufacturer, or they can be constructed by an owner, like an owner builder on the site, under the supervision of a qualified inspection agency. I'm sure a lot of you guys have probably seen photos of tiny homes, but let's go to the next slide. Oh, is this it?
yeah.
Oh, sorry. So with tiny homes, only one is allowed per parcel. It needs to be connected to an approved water source and sewage disposal facility. It shall be connected to a source of electricity. If it's not connected to the local utility, electric utility power source, then it can be part of an off-grid system that's designed, with solar to meet the needs of the expected loads for that house or that home, tiny home. It can't be just left or parked in the driveway. It has to be, basically on a parking pad, but it does need to be accessible to be able to easily tow it onto and off the property. It does need to incorporate design features and materials typically used for houses, such as siding and roofing materials. It's, pitched roofs, eaves, residential windows, and window trim. And I'll just say a lot of this is coming from the county website. And sprinklers are generally required, except in specific circumstances, and that's very specific within the county. So if anybody is interested in understanding that, you can go to our website to get to that page on the county website.
We generally design things on foundation, so we're just giving you the information.
Talking about more ways to get houses or units on the property. Permits are required, just like any new house or ADU. And the permit must be renewed with the county every 5 years. And it also needs to be registered with the DMV because it is a portable unit.
Wow.
And then when it is inspected locally, because they are regulated by the state in terms of their manufacturing, the local building official would only be coming to the property to inspect to make sure that it's certified by a third-party certification, but also that the installation to the site utilities is in accordance with the codes. So that is it.
That's it. We did it.
So we got through ADUs, SB9, and tiny homes. Yes.
Did I understand you to say that only one tiny home can be on a parcel? I have
Yes.
12,000 square feet in my property.
My understanding is one tiny home.
Find your parcel.
Yeah. Or you use SB9 and then you can have 4 units and 2.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Going back to SB9 for a minute, I'm having trouble understanding the county requires, if it's an unincorporated area outside the city, you have to have 1 acre to build on.
Mhm.
So if you have an existing parcel that was before that, and you've got 5,000 square feet in
Mhm.
Belton or Boulder Creek or whatever, you're saying SB9 says that you can split that into two parcels of 2,500 square feet and put 2 or possibly 4 houses on it?
So there are some actual zoning, like specific, parcels that can't do this, depending on what your zoning is. But residential zoning, but so like if it's farm or if it's ag, or if it's in a geological hazard, like there is kind of a list of properties that don't fit, and it starts to impact more rural areas, either farmland or in the mountains. So, but theoretically, if it fit within that zoning, then yes. The answer is yes, you can subdivide that if it fits, yeah. But in a lot of instances, you have to tear a house down. I mean, it's at some point, it becomes like on paper, like not cost effective, you know, if you have to start tearing things down and building new houses and all that. So, you know, as an example, I think there's been, last time we spoke to somebody in the city, there was one person that came to the city to explore doing SB9, and this is now in its second year. Because one, I think people don't know enough about it, and two, you know, when you start looking at each individual property, not all properties are going to really it's not going to really make sense. So
Another on the splitting the property. I have a large property, which I don't even want all that. But if I want to expand on that property, I was told I could not do it because it had an endangered species, the June beetle. So how do you get past that? And then also, what happens to the neighbors when they find out that your property is going to be split in half and another house is going to be built? It's like,
to answer the first question, your situation is specific, and we love problem solving in that way. So about the June bug, you might need a second opinion. And then the second part is, unfortunately, I think this is part of why it's important for everybody to get educated about what these laws are, and know what your neighbor's options are, and how that's going to work for you, and make sure you're nice to them, because if you don't have a good relationship, they're not really going to care what you think. They'll just be able to do whatever. So
the allowance of the one tiny home on wheels for a parcel, that's been approved by the county, as I understand it. Are any of the 4 municipalities in the county also on board with that?
I don't think they've adopted it. It's probably not gonna not happen, but I don't think it's top of list. I haven't actually heard of anything. I don't know if you've heard of anything in the city. So the cities, it's a little bit harder because you can't park them in a driveway. So, yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
So if you build something on your property, how does the county reassess your taxes according to that?
Yeah. Well, they have some complicated evaluation calculation that they do. It's not like, it's not going to go all the way to like what it would be on the market. And maybe Tom, you know more specifically, but our experience is that it is reassessed, but it's not necessarily reassessed at full market value.
Would be reassessed at market value, and it probably wouldn't even be reassessed at the actual cost that it took you. They're not going to reassess at $500 to $800 a square foot when you build an ADU, but they will add the assessment upon the completion of the permit if you build something on the property.
I think okay.
Just quickly, when the questions are done, could we ask Tom to talk about the desirability or lack of desirability in the marketplace for these?
Sure. I mean, yeah. Yes.
I think so.
Yeah,
sure. So if you are permitted to have if you go, we have a situation where we have a studio apartment that has a bathroom and a shower, and the city discovered it. And so they told me that we had to convert it to an ADU. They said we couldn't have an exterior bedroom. So that's fine. So if we go ahead and convert it to an ADU, then the question is, are we then obligated to rent it? Because we never built it. We built it as a spare bedroom, and we don't really want to have it as an ADU, but now that they've discovered that we have it, we have to convert it. So, but once we get the permit and we build it, are we then obligated to rent it out?
No.
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 Okay.
And ADUs aren't, the fear for so long was that every homeowner that in Santa Cruz that built an ADU was all about getting students in and at jacked up rental rates. But really, the way that the world's changing is it's for mom or dad to come back and live with you, or your kid that's home from college, or COVID happens and suddenly everybody's moving back, or somewhere down the road you want to retire and travel, and maybe you're moving into the ADU. So there's lots of reasons to have ADUs, just having all those options. And it's not, it's not, very few people are building ADUs just to create a rental. It more often has to do with their own personal needs as life evolves.
One thing I wanted to mention that isn't in our slides, but I think was in part of what you had written up, is that we do have a lot of information about the difference between manufactured homes and prefab and offsite construction. Those are kind of three main ways that people, or alternative ways that people are looking to build. But there's a lot of different bits of information that you'll find in the city and the county about that, but people have seen probably all different types of companies either coming up on the internet or your searches, or neighbors, like a Bodu is one that's pretty prevalent in our area, and they basically come and drop the ADU in your backyard. So, a lot of what we're talking about, these are all laws and whatnot, but it all takes money and it takes time and planning. And so this is just the first step of exploring whether or not these things are an option for any of you or appealing. And then there's how to get there and what does it cost and all those things. And obviously, we're all resources for you on evaluating whether or not it makes sense, because, it doesn't make sense for everybody, so.
I have two questions. So can you all hear me?
Yeah.
So SB 9 was created almost 3 years ago, and there's only one project within the city that where somebody's trying to do the lots.
One inquiry, I think, was what you were told, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So obviously we had COVID in there, which slowed everything down and made things more difficult. But on the ADU front, or the junior ADU front, after 3 years now, are you seeing, I know it was a huge adjustment for the planning departments in the various municipalities to suddenly have this thrust upon them, and how are we going to accommodate this and deal with it and staff it? Are you seeing some kind of a groundswell or momentum coming with more projects in the pipeline and coming through the other end? And
I mean, we're working on, I don't know, I don't even know how many ADUs, but I mean, we've done several, recently. I think the challenge right now is, along with COVID, we also have seen construction costs, and go higher than we've ever seen them. So we kind of have this challenging moment where people are sort of wanting to do it and going through the process, but again, it doesn't always pencil out for everybody, particularly if the only reason is that you're going to build it to rent it out, and that time period on a spreadsheet doesn't pencil with how much it's going to cost you to do versus personal enjoyment, or whatever the case might be. I mean, you can do a short-term vacation rental if it's on your properties, but
not everybody wants to do that. So I think we do see it. Everybody's, like you say, everybody's interested in doing it. Everybody wants to do it, but we're looking for ways to do it quickly, in terms of construction and inexpensively, and that's not always quality. So you kind of have to really evaluate all aspects of that. Do you have anything?
Do you feel like the city and the county are more prepared to process these and have a little bit more of a flow? And is it getting easier to go through the process?
Yes, it is. And I mean, one thing that's great about Santa Cruz on the ADU front is that in the city, the ADUs, Santa Cruz was a spearhead in ADUs long before the state even brought these laws. So the city of Santa Cruz has been dealing with this for a long, long time, and so when they got word that the state, and they already had ordinances within, or rules within their ordinances about ADUs. So what they had to do was they had to update their ADU ordinance based on some of the state guidelines. But in a way, they were providing a little bit more leniency within what they were going to allow. And then the county did follow suit with that eventually, also, where they had to create their own ADU guidelines as well, and their own ordinance. So they are prepared for that, and they know how to handle it, which is different than maybe some other jurisdictions that haven't, previously, come 3 years, 3 years ago, some jurisdictions didn't really know much about ADUs, so they weren't really prepared for that. So I think Santa Cruz in general has been prepared for it, and they've been able to handle it. Yeah,
supportive of it.
I saw one of the slides that said if it wasn't approved within a 60 days, then it's considered approved. Is that just because they don't get around to it?
Yeah, that had to do with, that was one of the AB, I don't know what number it was. Yeah, that's one of the more streamlining effects, where that's if they don't basically they don't respond within that much time, then the state's saying if you're not going to respond within 60 days, then it's approved. But all they have to do is provide comments, within that time frame. Yeah.
I mean, this is a state issue, we're just one of the whole state, but like Christian said, I mean, we work in all over the place, and despite what everybody's heard, and we don't have really any issues, particularly with the city of Santa Cruz. We feel like it's actually the best that we have to deal with, and a lot of, obviously it's relationships, but so I think
just another question I would have, this has been coming up quite a lot lately with clients that perhaps built an ADU 10 or 15 years ago and went through a process and ended up as part of that with a deed restriction on title, where when the rules were you had to occupy, you couldn't rent out an ADU, it had to be a family member. Those deed restrictions are still in existence. Do you have any sense or information or hope that it seems unfair that somebody that with SB 9 and some of these changes, that somebody that was ahead of the curve 10 years ago would be stuck with a deed restriction when that restriction is far worse than what is required today?
I don't have a specific answer for you of when that's going to happen, but I can tell you it's a very discussed topic in the city, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw real activity on that topic this year.
Did people petition to have that removed, or?
There is no avenue for that currently. I mean, people are verbally doing that because it's not, but it has to be formally addressed, and it's not being formally addressed in any kind of
once it's on your title,
Yeah.
it doesn't just come off because you want it to come off. There has to be a process around it because it has to be removed
Right.
through some sort of a legal ruling, so that it's in essence unrecorded.
It sounds to me, this is not a question, but just a comment. It sounds to me that the city and the county have a bureaucratic and an enforcement nightmare coming on very quickly. I mean, if a lot of people all of a sudden decide they want to, with what property values are in this county, they're going to need a lot more staff if they're going to deal with this in a realistic way.
Well, they would hire more staff to meet the problem if housing was less expensive and people could afford to move here and work for the county of the city.
Yeah, that's an op-ed piece. You should write that. But,
I'm not saying yet. I mean, I'm not favoring it one way or the other. It just looks like potential chaos. They have enough trouble dealing with what they've got.
I mean, what we find is that all these things don't happen at once, you know, like he's talking about the SB9 is a slow roller right now, but in 2 years, when people start getting more educated like you are tonight, then we might see change when people start really seeing the opportunity. ADUs have taken time and now there's 80 people wondering how they can do it. So,
Just follow up, Tom, you're a realtor, you sell people's houses. Have you come up against this problem with a deed restriction? Somebody wants to sell their house.
Yes, it's currently happening.
What do they do?
Well, there's no process currently, so
You
that's.
can't sell your house?
No, you can sell the house. Someone just has to buy it with the same deed restriction that you had when you built the unit. So, and most people would rather have more flexibility around the use of their ADU, particularly as they're looking down another 10 or 20 years down the road in their lives. So, I mean, I kind of agree. There's an inherent unfairness in those deed restrictions based on what's happened today. So I am going to guess, I mean, the city in particular is favorable to density within the urban core. So I think that it will probably change. But to his point, it is a bureaucratic nightmare. They don't have the staffing. It makes all these things hard. I mean, what I would say is, this is a symptom of where we're living and the time we're living in now. We have a housing crisis in California. There's that irony that I face every day of, hearing people, whose kids can't afford to stay in Santa Cruz and live here. That's a terrible thing. But at the same time, I've seen very few of those people who, when they were ready to move elsewhere, weren't prepared to sell their house for as much as they could possibly get it. It's hard to have it both ways, and we all know how expensive it is to live here, and then there's some sadness and some pain around that, and it's a challenge to the entire community. We have a green belt around most of Santa Cruz County, and part of the price to pay for that is going to be densifying within the core, and this is obviously a major avenue and means to do that. So in the residential neighborhoods where people are used to having 10,000 square foot lots or 15,000 square foot lots like Rolling Woods Estates, this is one of the potential challenges they have, is that the character of that neighborhood may change, and that becomes the new price for living in an area where the housing prices are so significantly high and the rental prices are. So I all these things that we've seen come, what's the eviction ordinances, what's the rent control, what's the empty home tax bill, tax, all of those things are just they're little symptoms that keep pushing up from below of the much bigger problem, which is that we have a housing crisis. It's not just in Santa Cruz County, it's all over California. So I as homeowners, as community members, I think these are things we're gonna be wrestling with for quite some time. We have to find a way to sort of work with it, make peace with it, recreate our own lives within it. And, hopefully, come out with a better community and one that we still choose to live in. These are hard things.
I
But,
wanted to add on to that other services thing that I just thought of. So the thing that we're talking about was something that was approved in 2020 by the, or handed down from the state in 2020, and it was a 5-year situation. And they put a limit on it. So we're halfway through that. And so the city has never anticipated giving this as an option. I mean, in the ideal world, we wouldn't be creating single family homes with ADUs and then renting them out to college students and moving to a less expensive place, which is what's happening. So one possible situation is that the city's waiting around to see if the state's going to extend this, or if it was just going to end in 5 years and they don't have to deal with it. And so that could be one reason why it's just stagnant, is that it wasn't something the city ever wanted to do in the first place. And the state hasn't really done, I mean, they haven't communicated what the next phase of that is. So I just want to be clear about that.
So Dan, your question was about how the question of ADUs enters into sort of the market dynamics of how home valuations and how people view desirability in terms of ADUs or junior ADUs or some of these things we've been talking about. Is that the?
Yeah, what's the market say about?
Well, COVID. So what happened in COVID? Everybody rethought their lives. We had an existential moment on the planet, and we saw suddenly all these shifts starting to happen. We had virtual work. We had people, moving to Lake Tahoe and working from Lake Tahoe. We had more people buying second homes. Suddenly people needed bigger houses because they were home all the time. They needed a house with 2 offices. They needed a workout space. They needed a place for the kids to do their homeschooling. Suddenly, all the thoughts and desirability around what people need in the house changed a lot. So from my perspective as a realtor, people these days, particularly the people that are coming over the hill that have significant money, they don't want to go through this process that we've just heard about tonight. It's good to know it's simplified because it's still not seeming very simple, from some of the details we heard. But they're hugely desirable. So we've got a huge aging demographic in this country, and Santa Cruz is definitely aging. So there's all sorts of concerns about where's mom going to live or where's dad going to live. There's COVID showed us that, in times of need, families are extremely important. So we have so many more multi-generational buyers out there that are looking to purchase with a family member, a brother, sister, parent. It's one way they can afford to buy in Santa Cruz, is by combining incomes. So it's hard for me to imagine that if you can build a reasonable cost ADU or junior ADU, that ultimately the market you're not going to be over improving by doing that. The market, for the foreseeable future, as long as the aging demographic continues, which, what do we have, another 20 years before we're all gone? So at least for the next 20 years, there's a lot of ADUs. After that, they're on their own, as long as they take care of me when I'm old and doddering. But it's one of the things people ask about. In the same way that, fascinating, square foot per square foot, a single level home sells for a lot more than a 2-story or a multi-story home. Why is that? Because the aging demographic. Everybody wants single level homes now, and the younger people, the millennials that are buying homes, they're worried about what is going to happen with dad and mom, so they want a single level home. Or at very worst, they want something like a like a ensuite, nice bedroom on the first floor that doesn't have any stairs. So these patterns are changing, and you know, we see it every day in the marketplace in terms of what people are asking for and the kinds of situations they want to build or live in or move to. Does that answer the question? So you know, in terms of ultimate payback on the creation of an ADU, I think the market will reward that. You know, you're not wasting money that, you know, you may not have the money to afford to build it in the first place if the numbers don't work, but I think the market will desire it still in another 10 or 20 years. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
Does this see deed restrictions on homeowners associations? So those kind of rules and regulations are gone, and they can add on to any one of those? Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be a whole can of worms coming. You know, one of the most important things in a homeowners association is how many renters you have versus owner occupants. You know, that can affect drastically the ability for lenders to lend on the project. So that's going to be an interesting thing. Okay, any other questions? I really appreciate you guys for sticking around. And follow up another, I mean, we just scratched the surface. It's complicated. Feel free to call.
Do you have any plans with you?
Call us. We're happy to help you track down the information.
Grab a card on the way out.
Thank you so much. That was really very helpful. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, and yeah, reach out. We can certainly talk you through some of that.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Just a quickie, I know you want to get home. I have a
So great.
single family.
Okay.
It's 1 acre zoning.
Oh, so